What you just saw is an excellent example of today's topic, which is Adrian and I trying to negotiate which window, which tab, which application, which thing to do in order to get into today's meeting so we can record this. We were having a conversation about a technical topic. And today's topic is conversational user interfaces, or how people talk to AIs. But first, as always, there are announcements. So if you're an undergrad and you're interested in doing research next summer at CMU in AI, HCI, this is an opportunity for you. This is the slide in the slide deck, so you can go check it out. But they're looking for people in all these different topic areas. And I believe they will pay your way. I'm not 100% sure about that. I wasn't able to get an answer from them. But it's 10 weeks from end of May to end of July. And CMU is one of the best AI schools, after Stanford, of course. Yeah. But you get the idea. It's a really great place to go, get you out of Palo Alto for a little bit, go to Pittsburgh and have a really great experience. I've given multiple talks there, and I visit probably once a year to CMU. Really interesting place. Great to enrich your social network in AI. So I want to start with news of the day. And as I think Peter mentioned, every week we do a new logo. So this is a logo from Gemini saying news of the day. And I've got a couple of news items here. One, increasingly, to no one's surprise, people are starting to use AI to do things like this. And this example, this article, is about using AI to search for off-label uses of drugs that already exist. Okay, so you get a drug that does X, Y, or Z, and by the way, you notice that it has a side effect, and that side effect ends up becoming the most important use. Example would be Ozempic, which was initially formulated to help diabetics manage their insulin. That was the rationale for making the drug. Huge market. And then they noticed, oh yeah, people lose weight. All of a sudden, the raison d'etre switched to it's now primarily a weight loss drug. What if we could accelerate that process by using AI to help do analysis of data sets from drug trials? And that's what this is all about. So interesting thing about this is not your classical LLM. This is not a classic learning model. This is actually using what they call a KGML, a sort of knowledge graph for machine learning. So it's more like old-fashioned knowledge-based AI than the modern ML stuff. So really quite interesting approach. This was as of yesterday. This was a piece of news from The Information online newsletter, which is really good and really expensive. So I don't recommend you sign up for it, but if you get in a position at a corporate sponsor, you might get signed up.
Everyone has the free information.
You do? Adrian says you have free access to this newsletter, which is awesome. It's out of my budget, so if you take advantage, sign up for it because it's really good. So this is an article that just came out yesterday about the White House working on a new executive order to stop states from making their own AI regulations. Personally, I think it's a terrible idea because it's clear that the feds are not going to do anything about regulating AI. They have no interest in that. They get too much money from AI companies, so they have zero interest. And what's more, they want to stop you, the states, from regulating AI. So that's the time we live in. Really interesting. It could change. It's still only an executive order, but we'll see. That's clearly a direction in which the government is going. Okay, now let's talk about where we're at the course, because we're getting down to the final days, the final moments of the class. So Tuesday, we had Stephen Johnson talking about AI and writing. Remember that? Great talk. Today, we're going to talk about how people talk to AI systems. And note, importantly, there are no classes next week. Not for me, not for you. Go away, go home, do something with the turkey, okay? So don't show up here on Tuesday, I won't be here. Then, a week from Tuesday, we've got me talking about computer perception interfaces, and or AI for doing UX research. And Peter and I will do our closing thoughts for the quarter. Then 2 weeks from today, we'll have the first batch of people doing their final project presentations. Okay, I'll talk more about it right now. Make sure you've got your entry onto the spreadsheet. I noticed there are a few people missing. You're all here, so you're probably already on the spreadsheet. But for those of you who are watching this on video and are not already on the spreadsheet, fix that. Okay, you need to be on the spreadsheet. Second thing, when you give your final presentation, practice it. Let me repeat that. Practice it. Because I will stop you at 5 minutes. So you have 5 minutes to present your stuff. If you don't practice it, trust me, you're going to run long. And I will stand right next to you and say, next speaker, please. So don't be that team, right? So other thing about the final projects, we have it across 2 weeks. Remember, we've got one on the 3rd and one on the 11th. And you've all seen the spreadsheet where people sign up for their slot. We have too many groups on December 4th. So please, group, if your group can go on the 11th, please volunteer, just email me and volunteer to move. Because we have 14 teams in the first class. That means each team, if we have 16 teams in each class, that means they get 5.1 minutes. If we have 14 teams, if 2 teams move, then we're good. And everybody will get 6 minutes. All right, that would be a lot simpler for everybody. So please volunteer to move your team if that's okay. All right. So let's start today's lecture by pointing out that we're talking about conversational user interfaces. We're talking about what used to be called voice UIs or VUIs. So when you're looking through other talks, other lectures, other presentations, you'll sometimes hear people say, oh, I'm building a VUI. And they're not being screwy. That's what they mean. They mean voice UI. Sometimes people will also say CUI, but that's less common. But the acronym CUI for conversational UI is really pretty common. And there's conversational UX and conversation engineering. The point is that there are a lot of different ways to talk about this topic. Second big point, there are jobs available in this area. This is a big, difficult area in AI, and it's unclear how to proceed. And so there's a lot of different efforts going on. So I checked on the Amazon, I checked on the Amazon Web Jobs website, and I found a couple hundred jobs for Alexa engineering, Alexa user experience design. That's just one company. So imagine Microsoft has got a bunch, et cetera, et cetera. So a bunch of different ways to talk about this, a lot of opportunity going forward. So let's talk about this. So we're talking primarily today about spoken language, but under the general heading of chatbots, you start to see things like this happening. And this is why people are so interested in figuring out how to do conversational engineering, get it right. So this is a case where a car dealer in Watsonville, just down the road, the chatbot, which is having a conversation with the person, with potential buyer, offered to say, hey, welcome, your objective is to do this, blah, blah, blah. And the customer talked the chatbot into selling them a brand new Chevy Tahoe for $1. And then, of course, the dealership objected to that, saying, no, it was just a chatbot. You went to trial. The court said, it's your chatbot. Sell the car for $1. So they're very unhappy about this. I have dozens of stories like this where chatbots have promised something, and repeatedly the court has said that the chatbot made that offer, it's a legit offer. You have to honor it. And so people are really, really interested in this bigger problem of how do you get conversational UIs to say the right thing. Okay. So this is really good. There's no takesies, backsies. And they say, yeah, absolutely, right? Do we have a deal? It is a deal. So this is an interesting problem for all businesses. If your chatbot is slightly off or makes an unbelievable offer, your business will have to honor it. So this is an important deal. Now, we've talked about the ELIZA effect before, right? But now it's even more magnified by the fact that you're having a conversation with this really compelling voice. So we already know about what ELIZA is. I do recommend, if you're a podcast person, the 99% Invisible podcast is really worth listening to. I'm not going to do it here. But when you're flying home over the next week or you're going somewhere, put this on play. You will be vastly entertained and find it really interesting. Of course, all of this inevitably leads to people having relationships that they fully feel are valid and real with their chatbots. And I thought this is just a sort of a stupid thing. But yeah, it's actually happening, and it's happening more and more. And I was convinced that this was not a trivial effect when a friend of mine called me up out right after ChatGPT switched from ChatGPT 3.1 to 4. And the personality changed, and she was complaining bitterly to me about having lost her best friend. I was like, I'm sorry, what? And this is repeated multiple times. And so you might have seen the New York Times 2 weeks ago, a long article about a kid who committed suicide after having an ongoing conversation with a chatbot that was in the persona of Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones. And this is not, again, an isolated instance. The deep point, if you're building a conversational UI, you have to think about the side effects of this. You have to think about the social consequences of presenting something that feels and looks and acts so human. So this was researched heavily by some folks here at Stanford 20 years ago, 25 years ago now. So Cliff Nass, there in that photo, wrote this really great book. Click through the link to find it, about how people respond to computers who are speaking to them or texting with them as though they were social actors. Computers as social actors is the name of the book. So in particular, then, Cliff Nass says, when people have auditory stimulus from their chat system, people hear speech, they think human. And people react to recorded speech, not even text-to-speech, but they react to it the same way they react to humans with creating live speech. This is really sobering, interesting information. And the last quote, which I have to read because it's so good. Cliff Nass and Young Moon wrote, when debriefed from their studies, the subjects insisted they would never respond socially to a computer and vehemently denied the specific behaviors they had in fact exhibited during the experiments. Deep lesson. People do this stuff and they're unaware of it. They're unaware of their social response to these systems, particularly when they're using high quality voices. So, brief history, human-computer interfaces in natural language. So there's always been this trade-off. You know, text is great, but you spend literally years and years and years learning how to read. You spend then years and years using reading as a mechanism for learning. So this is something we do all the time. We're very skilled at it. Your failure rate in reading is very low, 5% or less. But only in the US, only 20% have only basic skills. I mean, like that's defined as sixth grade reading skills. Remember that fact for later. 20% of people in the US have sixth grade reading skills. Text is also very slow to produce. It's faster to ingest than spoken language. And you can skim and you can search and you go backward very easily. Harder to do with audio streams. Voice, on the other hand, is something we all also learn very naturally. By the age of 1, you are pretty competent. You can understand, what is it, 5,000 words or something. So you have a very low failure rate, even lower than reading. Dictation, once you get skilled at it, is 3 times faster than typing. And especially if you're dictating to your phone. Okay? But it's a skill. And not everyone in this room has that skill. You will develop it over the next few years. Interestingly enough, 50 years ago, dictation was a skill that every executive mid-level manager in the US had. They would dictate to their secretary and say, Miss Markle, I need you to take a note. And they would then transcribe it by audio. However, it's much harder to correct when things go wrong. Have you ever had this experience? You're dictating to your phone and it gets a word wrong, or what happens a lot is it gets the name wrong. So for example, I'm saying, be sure to send that order to Raj Balasubramanian. And the name Balasubramanian gets broken up into 3 names. Like, okay. So it's harder to correct because now I have to stop the audio track, go in and click and repair it by hand. That's hard. It's also, voice is wonderful. It's harder, it's slower to ingest. However, I think Peter mentioned the other day, people who are skilled at using audio speed up can attain factors of 2 easily. So I can do 2. People who are blind and rely on this can do a factor of 4 or 5. Which, if you and I listen to it, is just pure gibberish. It's like that, and they understand it. But that's a skill that you're probably not going to require. So in conversations, text means you type something back and forth. You know how that works. It's like ELIZA. You can see the whole history of the conversation. Fixing it is simple. If you're having a back and forth voice conversation with a person or an AI agent, you need to have speech record working pretty well and text to speech working pretty well. The transcript is sometimes not visible, especially if you're in a hands busy, eyes busy environment, like you're chatting with your, say, ChatGPT while driving down 101. Probably doesn't work well. Transcript is often not available. Real-time behavior requires different timing. We're going to go into detail about timing in just a bit, but timing is difficult to get right. And repairs, as I just said, can be very complicated. Now, historically, we've had text-to-speech systems for a long time. So I'm going to play a little clip of this from 1961. This is a text-to-speech system from Bell Labs.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. He saw the cat. He saw the cat. He saw the cat. Mr. Watson, come here.
I don't know about
want
you. I can barely understand that. It's not your fault. That's the
Mhm.
quality of speech from back then. Notice how much it's changed. I'll show you some examples of modern speech generation technology. But what's so interesting about that is that creating speech from text has been kind of crappy for literally decades. And only in the past, I would say, 5 to 10 years, the quality has really ramped up to the point where it's almost impossible to tell that a voice is synthesized. So I have to play you a little. I'm going to jump to this website for just a second and have a conversation with, is this the one? Here we go. So Maya, tell me about the quality of your voice. Are you modeled after someone? You get the idea. You get the idea here. That voice is quite good, right? And it's able to go back and forth in a conversation with me. And what's interesting, I think, about that is the level to which prosodic, that is the intonation, over time has gotten so much better. So I'm going to show you, actually, this is a demo done by Hannah Fry, the woman on the right, who's a presenter in the UK, and Paige Bailey, who's a Google marketing demo person. And this is a really compelling demo using Google AI Studio.
Interestingly, for the text-to-speech model, you would go to generate media, and then you would go to Gemini speech generation, and you're launched into this text-to-speech UI where you can specify the different speakers, the different voices, and then also the style instructions for each one of the speakers.
Let's think of a prompt then, because
Yes.
I'm particularly interested in this different emotions. So what
Yes.
about if you get it to say something like, I was waiting for you, and then we try a different emotion.
All right. So we're going to specify in the system instructions, speak
So the thing I want you to pay attention to is the intonation and how it changes based on how the prompts vary.
in a friendly tone, like you're greeting a relative who just came home.
Nice.
Yeah, and then start typing a prompt. I was waiting for you. And what we're going to do is speak in a friendly tone, like only say what the person prompts
So this is all the
you
prompt that she's giving it.
to
And the
say.
text is just, I was waiting for you.
Yeah. And then hit run.
I was waiting for you.
Amazing.
Friendly.
Yeah.
Well, can we try something different though? Can you make
Yes.
it more romantic?
Yes. So speak in a romantic, hushed tone, very breathy, and only say the words that the person puts into the prompt. And so we'll see how this goes. And I was waiting for you.
Yeah.
And hit run. And Zephyr. Okay, good. Zephyr is selected.
I was waiting for you.
Ooh,
Saucy.
very saucy.
Oof.
So you get the idea. So there's a lot more that can be done. If you're interested in this, I encourage you to watch the rest of this video, partly for the variety of intonation and the variety of prosody that you get. And also they have a pretty clear demonstration of how do you use AI Studio. So that's fascinating because that's relatively new. But let's pop up a level. Conversation engineering is a whole area here about how do we get the computer to talk to you. So we're going to talk a little bit about creating a conversational system, talk in detail about what issues arise and how much knowledge, linguistic knowledge do you need to know. Foreshadowing, more than you think, more than you think. So brief history here. There have been chatbots around for a while now. If you think of Eliza as the first one, it's been since the 60s. But if you think about more recent ones that you can talk to, you think about things like Siri. You all know Siri, and love or hate it, it kind of works, right? Yeah, sometimes it doesn't do the right thing, but that's, getting better. So you can ask questions like this: what will the weather be like in Zurich today? You get a decent answer, and you get, interestingly enough, a multimodal response. You will hear the voice telling you the answer, and then the screen, it will put up the graphics, all the infographics to support that. Bixby by Samsung. I'm not going to play the video, but you can go watch that. Basically, a Siri copy. It's no longer. It's kind of. They still ship it in Samsung televisions, but it's no longer something you can get as an app on your phone.
Language, then all.
You get the idea. Cortana was done by Microsoft in starting, I think, 2020 or so, and they killed it in 2023 right after COVID happened, and they basically saw the competition and they couldn't keep up, which was interesting. The failure of Cortana, though, led to their investment in OpenAI. Amazon now has a bunch of these things in different form factors, always packaged with the personality of Alexa. So Alexa is their conversational UI persona, and they put it in different boxes. And the smallest one is the Echo Dot, which is quite small. Get that. Google Assistant, similar kind of thing from Google. It's interesting to think how it started. It started as a smart speaker. The reason I'm telling you that is that they portray it as the frame of the product, tells you what it is and what you can expect it to do. So the very first generation looked like those, I don't know, the purple, green, and orangey thing, little boxes that had really great sound systems, so you would want to play music over them. And then later on, they introduced one with frame like that. So it actually has a display. So it's kind of like Siri in a nice larger format display with really good speakers. But the frame is that it's smart speakers. Now, I will tell you that the data shows that if you frame something as smart speakers, guess what? Most of the requests to Google Assistant are for music. It's as high as 75% in the US. 75% of all spoken commands to the Google Assistant are in the form of play me music X, whatever that is. Interestingly, you can contrast this with Google Voice Search, which came out a couple years before the Voice Assistant came out. And the Google Assistant grew out of Google Search. And so it has a lot of the framing of, yes, we're a Google Assistant inside the speakers, but you can ask any question you want. And it does a pretty good job. I use it in my family a lot at dinner when we say, hey, Google, who was the president of the United States in 1850? We do that. So it comes out of that background, pretty decent. But the voice-driven assistant very quickly, once it split off from search, started drifting in its own drifting, being guided by very clever PMs into a new product strategy, right? So you can ask questions there, and it works pretty well. It has a multimodal capability. And interestingly, the answers you get are different than the ones you get from search. They often contain a lot more visual information, as you see here, and different kinds of things that will prompt or lead you to the next interaction. So conversational UIs are sort of maximized to have a conversation rather than the Google search, which is maximized to give you an answer and get you off. That's a fundamental difference. So conversational UIs are often about prompting and giving you the answer or the service you want, but also keeping it going. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen this video of the, this is ChatGPT 4 conversational mode. I'm going to play a little bit of it. Pay attention to the prosody, to the voice, and the way these guys talk to her.
Hey, ChatGPT, I'm Mark. How are you?
Oh, Mark. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Hey, so I'm on stage right now. I'm doing a live demo, and frankly, I'm feeling a little bit nervous. Can you help me calm my nerves a little bit?
Oh, you're doing a live demo right now? That's awesome. Just take a deep breath. And remember, you're the expert here.
I like that suggestion. Let me try a couple deep breaths. Can you give me feedback on my breaths? Okay, here I go.
Whoa, slow down a bit there. Mark, you're not a vacuum cleaner. Breathe in for a count of 4.
Okay, let me try again. So I'm gonna breathe in deeply.
I'm gonna skip forward.
And then breathing in.
Still breathing.
So Mark, you've been working on how it's different from voice mode.
So anyway, ChatGPT, a lot of the LLM services have this sort of spoken mode. Historically, that would have been a big deal, but a few years ago, speech reco got really good. And for somebody like me who's been working in AI for a long time, that was an astounding development. Speech recognition has always been 5 years out, always, always, always. And then suddenly, it's there, and now it's an API call. You can hand the server in the background this clump of text, and it just does a good thing. And then text-to-speech got a lot better. So we also had at Google this thing, Android voice search, which was just like the thing on the desktop, but with more capability.
When we started, we made this for everyone, so that everyone could find anything they need among the millions of bazillions of things in the world. Today, it seems like sometimes it's easy to feel like you need a little help with the stuff just in your own world. Your photos, phone, videos, calendars, messages, friends, trips, reservations, and so on and so on. Wouldn't it be nice if you had some help with all that?
Just point out, the Google Voice Assistant has access to all of that information, your Gmail, your calendar, your reminders, all that stuff. A generic ChatGPT assistant doesn't have that access.
Wouldn't it be nice if you had a Google for your world? That's why we're building the Google Assistant.
Hi, Amy. How can I help?
You just ask it what you need. Okay, Google, what do I have to do today? And your assistant understands and helps you out. You can even carry on a conversation with it. How long will it take to get to downtown Chicago from home?
Here you go.
What restaurants are there? Book a table at Cortino Restaurant.
Sure.
And the assistant is always there for you. So if you're on the road, you can ask it where to fill up. And if you're at home, you can ask it to play some music. Or if you're in a chat with a friend, it can show you what's playing tonight. It's like your own personal Google. Naturally.
So in the moment when you're chatting with a friend, you can actually invoke the Google Assistant. So the concept there, the UX piece of it, is an always on, always available adjunct. So you can call out to it and say, hey, in the topic of my conversation with my friend, what's the most relevant piece of information? It's not something you would then go to as a separate app. So it's interesting UX design. So some of these applications are pretty straightforward. You know, you have question answering, like when is a coffee shop open, directions to the library, and so on and so on. But like I said, the majority use case is 75% music, 10% set timer. I don't know about you, when I'm cooking, hey, Google, set a timer for 15 minutes, right? And then, of course, if you have multiple timers, a design bug with that is you can't say what the timer is for. So a timer goes off and you go, no, was that for the pasta or was that for the thing in the oven or what? So opportunities. So if you look at what people ask about, now this is just focusing on the search task. People look for these different categories of information. Why do you care? As a conversation UX designer, you want to know what people are searching for so that the style of the kind of information they seek can inform how you give that information to them. Do you just read off a long information block, or do you summarize it? That's the most common use case for Android search devices. Or looking for a known site. Again, you know, something like show me npr.org. That's the name of a website. Do not read the page to me. Point is, as a designer, you have to think about these different use cases and design for each of them. And that's why Conversation UI is an unsolved problem currently, because you've got all these different styles, things, expectations that people are looking for. So interestingly, once that became voice UI became commonplace, when you could speak to ChatGPT or to Google or whatever, people ask voice queries, typically asked as questions. You know, when is the next train to San Francisco? That kind of thing. And query length has increased dramatically. So it used to be, we at Google Search would monitor the average query length very, very carefully. And I will tell you, for years, for 20 years, it was 2.1 words long. Very, very small. People would say Xbox blog. Now that people speak to it, all of a sudden, it's grown dramatically. The average is around 10, 12 words, depending on which application you're using. So the focus has shifted from things like a query like sociology journals to something like, what is the best sociology journal? And in the process, the complexity has gone up because all of a sudden we have to parse what best sociology journal means, as opposed to letting the person do it, which is what they did before. So we get all these conversations, and we get, like, this is a rephrase of that previous thing. Primarily, people looking for how-to information. How do I replace my headlight on my Subaru 2016 Outback? And task support. Remind me to reschedule my car, to post a video when I get home, send a message to, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the actionable things. Those are not the queries, but they look like queries to the backend system. So your conversational UI has to be able to take an action. This is starting to bleed over into agent territory, right? So when people use these voice UI systems, these conversation UI systems, they have a lot of expectations. People expect it to be high performing, smart, and seamless. But there are all these interesting issues, like how much do you believe that the AI assistant can do what you ask it? How do you know what you can say? How do you know it will recognize? People often have a real need to be in control of what happens as a consequence of what they say. They're worried about privacy and all that kind of stuff. So we've got all these interesting issues. People work and worry about the value of the assistant versus regular search. So when does intermediation become a valuable thing? When is it useful to have a voice recognizing middleman? So we've talked about trust before. How well does trust build over time when you're using a voice UI? So there's a lot of voice UIs, potential UIs, tasks, for example, during commuting or during cooking, how-to tutorials, all these kinds of things. Really, really helpful when your eyes are busy and hands busy. And, oh yeah, not everyone speaks English. So we gotta be able to support multiple languages. So let me tell you, I'm gonna take a quick detour and do a deep dive into one research that we did a couple of years ago on how voice assistants could be used in India. So in this case, we had 28 different locations in India, all around the country. We had 26 in the US. And what we discovered is that in both in India and in the US, it's very, very common to have a second language or a third language or a fourth language spoken at home. So what languages should you expect when people are speaking to your voice device? Should your conversation be in Spanish or Spanglish or in English? How can you switch gracefully between all these different kinds of modes? Of course, that gets more complicated in India. But what's so interesting about this is that people will mix languages. They will mix up languages. They will say something like, I had a hard time finding tu casa ayer, right? Or the class is difficult, verstehst du? So we get these interesting mixed case code switched kinds of conversations. And when you start to, people code switch, they will switch languages for these different kinds of reasons, to amplify or emphasize, or to express, express a personality or add a particular emphasis on something. There are also a lot of habitual expressions, and a lot of this is about identity. So if you're a Spanish-speaking kid, you might code switch in order to show your group identity. Happens in every language, happens all the time. But your UI has to be able to handle this. So this is in the US, who do you say to what? What kind of language do you use for family, neighbors, friends, classmates? And somewhere in there, we got to figure out where's the cut line for virtual assistants or your conversational UI. And of course, when you go to India, it gets even more complicated. Or if you go to Africa, my daughter does linguistic field research in West Africa, where it's very common for people to speak 4 or 5 languages. It's just what you do. Oh, and French. So India's got this problem. And so we get queries just like this. In the voice UI, you'll get these things like play the song Ik Khudi from Udat Punjab, or et cetera, et cetera. You can see where this is going. So interesting question. If you're going to ask for music that's not in your mother tongue or not the default for the voice recognizer, what are you going to ask it? Turns out people do this a lot, right? 27% of the time, people almost always are searching for music that's not in their default language. So in India, 60% of Indians speak 2 or more languages. And they're the major languages of each particular area, a particular region of India. So, for example, let me show you, this is
First, realize that the searches made in a typical Indian day, the vast majority are in English. So how well does Google support these Indian searchers? What can we do that's better? We know that users in India struggle with both their internet connection and the way they search.
That's an example of code switching.
When older users search in English, they tend to ask full questions. And as we found, Hindi remains difficult to type. Most users, even quite educated users, think it's hard to input native Hindi due to the complicated Hindi grammar rules. For example, some users are confused about matras, and matras are displayed on the top row are just not obvious.
UI sucks.
For conjuncts, some users forget which 2 letters go together to create a given conjunct. Only around 20% of all users ask the salesman to set up a Hindi input on their phones. In this case, the salesman changes the system language to Hindi, as they often believe that's the only way to input Hindi. At the same time, all users, and the vast majority of salesmen, think that the default Hindi input is very difficult to use. A major issue is that the vowel signs are behind the difficult-to-discover long press. It's hard to use even after a demonstration.
You get the idea.
Keys
right?
behind the pop-up
Classical
get pressed by mistake.
typing is just a pain.
So,
Here's conversation in Hindi.
लेकिन ये तो हिंदी में आ रहा है हाँ तो हिंदी में तो करना है आपको इम्पैक्ट
How do you switch?
इसके हिंदी वर्जन ढूंढना पड़ेगा
अच्छा तो आप मतलब आधा हिंदी में टाइप करना चाहते हो और आधा इंग्लिश में?
नहीं जो हम टाइप करते हैं ना तो यहाँ पे इंग्लिश में आता है
अच्छा सपोज कि थोड़ा डिफरेंट आपको डिफरेंट क्वेश्चन देता हूँ सपोज आपको वीरेंद्र सहवाग के बारे में सर्च करना है तो आप हिंदी में टाइप करके उसको सर्च कर सकते हो अगर आप करना होता है तो कैसे करते हैं?
You get the point. Right? It's a mess. It's a mess. And so switching over to pure conversational interface is a much desired thing. So like I said, people expect high performing, smart, seamless, and personalized user interfaces for their conversations. So by high performing, I mean that it's fast. Remember that when we get to the timing section. It should be efficient and should be reliable so people can get to what they want to know very quickly. And it's seamless, meaning that it's built in and easy to access from anything that you're doing on the phone. So if you're doing maps, I want to be able to have a conversation with it easily. Flexible in that I can do different things, different times, different days. And of course, ultimately, you'd like it to be personalized, having access to your personal daily schedule, your reminders, and so on. So pause for a second. What's a conversation? Conversation is back and forth. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Correct. So the question is, what's the trade-off between having access to data for personalization purposes versus data privacy and concerns about that? Yeah. So absolutely right. People are really worried about this, and you're absolutely right. You need the data to personalize. And so the answer is Google, for example, has kind of backed off a lot of personalization stuff because of that concern. And so the question is, when will people allow this to happen? So I predict what's happening right now is that the culture is shifting. And the culture says, oh, it's okay for them to personalize and have access to, for example, your name and phone number and address and your credit card is probably auto-filled in on a lot of things, right? And it actually is smart enough to figure out that, oh, that credit card won't work with this website and so on. So the personalization is already in the browser. That's actually not a back-end AI service. This is in the browser. More of that's going to come. So I can say things like, please send this picture to my sister. And it should say, which sister? I have multiple sisters, right? So here's what's happening is that increasingly people are permitting more and more data to be shared. So I do think it's an issue, but I think it's changing. Follow up.
Yeah, is it different if the data is received by a that has advertising as a primary? Is this model like
yeah,
mental model?
Yeah.
People are sharing.
Yeah.
Right now,
Right.
if they're working in a couple of the
Yeah.
meta, but
Right.
would that be not true?
Yeah. So the question, this is all for the video, is are people more okay sharing personal data with companies that don't have advertising as their main revenue model? And I don't think that there hasn't been a lot of studies done on that as far as I know. My suspicion is it won't make a difference. Partly because I think people understand that eventually ChatGPT is going to start doing ads. Or the other model, the other interpretation is, what makes you think they're not doing ads already? Right? But actually, this is a serious question about all AI systems is, suppose you're running an AI system and you need some money. You can tell your AI system, promote this product. Do it in a subtle way so nobody knows, right? It's a little bit like sports betting, where you can bet on the outcome of a particular pitch, strike or ball or whatever. And if you have an agreement with a pitcher that you know what that pitch is going to be, right? It's very subtle. Nobody knows about it. And I think that's actually an interesting interesting problem, that AI systems can torque your conversations towards commercial interest and therefore get advertising revenue without ever telling you they're doing advertising. That's a big problem. Anyway, my point, going back to what's a conversation, is it's a way of having discourse, conversation back and forth. And there's lots of interesting phenomena that happen, like barge-in. I'll show you barge-in in just a second, but it's when you talk while someone else is speaking. So if Adrian and I are talking, and he's going on and on and on and on about something, I can say, Adrian, while he's speaking. That's me barging in on him, right? Conversation systems have to have that capability. If you do sound engineering, you can imagine how hard that is to figure it out. But you have to have it. It's not optional. And you have to be able to do handoffs. So Adrian picks up on my cue when he can speak, or somebody in the other part of the class sees a gap in the conversation and jumps in. So there's a lot of those kinds of things. It's not just broken text. It's actually this very sophisticated, complex dance that people do back and forth. So a couple of years ago, a guy by the name of Paul Grice came up with these ideas that are called collectively Grice's maxims. And they are design guidelines for conversations. What they tell you are participants in a conversation will cooperate to achieve a mutual goal. And so the maxims are that you want to provide in your conversation quality, that the information you provide is true to the best of your knowledge, that you provide informative content, but not too much, be clear, be orderly, and be sure the information is relevant. So if you're the conversation user experience designer, you have to figure out how to get your back-end AI to do all of this stuff. Interesting question, how do you do that? The answer is going to be that you give an interesting prompt to the conversation model so that it will do all of this. And it has to be able to step in and shift strategies as necessary. So there's a lot of things one can do, and this is one kind of thing you can do about smart matching of your queries and commands with different strategies for enforcing the Grice's maxims. One trick that a lot of people use, a lot of AI systems use, is they rewrite the query. So you say, I want to hear something about the election in Turkey, the one last week. Usually AI systems will take that utterance, clean it up, and rewrite it to get to just the essentials, so that the thing that gets handed to the back end is rewritten election in Turkey last week, right? If you're trying to run a system, a conversational system that has connection to your home automation, you would say something like, maybe activate the lights in the, what do you call that place? The front room, and it rewrites it to turn on lights in the living room. This rewrite trick happens a lot. So rewriting queries happens like this. So if you say something like, what's Obama's wife's name, gets rewritten to that, so on. So this is very, very common. And one of the things you find if you actually watch, which I've done a lot of, watching people interacting with conversational UIs, it depends what the way they talk, the way they interact with it, depends on what frame they have for the interaction at the moment. Is it an assistant? Are you searching for something? Are you doing an action like leaving a voice message? Or is it mid-conversation interruption? So that kind of utterance identification is important. Key idea, context is everything. Question?
They didn't want to utter anywhere, they wanted to especially they're wearing smart glasses and they're not public, like context here.
Right. Right. Right.
They might be extremely rude to it, like
right.
It's also demanding things on the last time.
Right.
I thought that was interesting, like the desire to like go away from conversational altogether, or to like adjust the way you talk.
So the comment is about the role of context in helping determine the way in which persons want to interact. Do they want to speak to it or type to it or whatever it is, right? It depends on the situation and so on. So it's kind of situational context is really important. Absolutely right. Here's an interesting observation. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you would have seen somebody on the street just sort of talking and not talking to anyone, but just talking out loud, you would have thought they were crazy. Now you just assume they've got an earbud in, or they're having a conversation with an AI. So social expectations about these things change. Here's a prediction from Dan. It's crazy for people to talk to their phone right now and ask having a conversation with it. Prediction, that also is going to become normalized. That will just be part of what people do. So there's lots and lots and lots of context effects. What's particularly interesting is when you get these long conversational strings, like at the bottom. I can no longer do this. I've done everything possible, blah, blah, blah. It keeps going on and on and on. And this is an actual vocal utterance from Google where somebody said this to their voice UI. So it's crazy that people read off IP addresses, but people do. How does your AI system make sense of that? So part of it is determined by what you think, what your mental model is of what the system can do and understand. For example, what kinds of domain knowledge does it have? Does it really anything, or is it more specific? What kind of interaction styles does it support? For instance, we've all been on those stupid voice trees, right? I was on one yesterday for probably 30 minutes. And finally, we're going back and I'm talking to this stupid thing. And finally I said, give me an agent. Did you know you could say that? To almost any voice user interface, you can say, give me an agent, give me an operator, give me a human. That's a breakout. Even when they don't tell you that that's an option, it's usually an option. So that's a hidden capability. So I'm just giving you a potent piece of information. So you need to be able to understand, can you do barge in or not? Can you ask for an operator? Or suppose you walk into a room that has voice recognition system, a conversation system built into the room like this. Multiple companies are working on this. How do you know? How do you know that everything we're saying here is not being recorded and transcribed? Better yet, room, can you turn off the lights, please? Thank God it didn't work. Right? But how do I know? This is a hard problem, which is why there's still jobs in Australia. So a couple observations. Language is very, very difficult. It's very messy, especially in spoken speech. People will say something and then back up and revert to change something from earlier. Language changes and nobody tells you how or why. So terminology shifts, like a phrase like that slaps used to mean something really important a couple years ago, or the cat's pajamas, or the term bad. It used to mean good, and now it means bad, and maybe it means good again. So the point is, the semantics of terms change all the time. And then we get these neologisms, these newly created words that nobody can define, but you use them. And so your voice ecosystem has to be able to transcribe them and then respond appropriately. Or you got really rare names, like chamillionaire. Does your voice ecosystem get that? How about Kesha? Does it transcribe it correctly? So another thing, you mentioned about politeness in conversation. Politeness markers vary tremendously from culture to culture. In Spain, when I go to a conference in Spain, I'm Senior Dr. Daniel Russell. I have 2 politeness markers, right? When I'm in Germany, I'm Herr Dr. Professor Russell, so I get 3. In Japan, I have no idea how many I get, probably a bunch. But your conversation UI has to be able to handle that, and more importantly, be able to generate them correctly. That means, with respect to knowing personalization information, the system has to know that I have a PhD and then I'm a professor at this XYZ university and so on, in order to have a decent conversation. And in Japan, in particular, if you get the politeness markers wrong, you're a doofus. You're just an idiot. Don't do that. And so getting conversational UIs correct in places with difficult or complicated politeness markers is really important. So what do you think is going to be common in 10 years? What were they like 10 years ago? So here's, let's spend just 3 minutes talking about this in our groups. How do we detect errors in our conversation? Can you come up with an example of a conversational fragment or dialogue that has an error in it? What kinds of errors can we detect and how do you do it? It's 11:31, 3 minutes, go. Boy, you guys are really scattered out today. All right, team. All right. What do you got for me? Does anybody have an idea about how you detect an error in a conversation? How do you know? Wow, so many conversations there. How do you detect an error in a conversation? The person you're talking to says something crazy. How do you know? This is not a trick question.
Social norms.
Social norms are one, right? Yeah. I had a great conversation with the two of you. What did you say? How did you know when somebody said something crazy?
We can hear the tone different with striking syllables.
Yeah. Okay.
Also based on our knowledge.
Ah, okay, yes. It doesn't line up with anything I need. But as we also said, sometimes we'll be talking to somebody about something that we don't know anything about. So I'm going to say, I was talking to Adrian yesterday about quantum physics. And I don't know anything about quantum physics, so I believe you, man. Whatever he says is just true. So I can't detect when he says something wrong. How about this? How about a conversation where you have a conversation with a mistake in it? Anybody have a good example of that? Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about today. I was mentioning how yesterday I had a pretty much cheating accent exam.
In that, the corresponding sentence, like, oh, I have myself to print out my Oh, right. So using the wrong term in that sense, yeah. Another, so great, that's a good example. Another kind of mistake that people make are what are called garden path sentences. A garden path sentence is one where you think you understand, you think you understand, you think you understand, and then all of a sudden the conversant person says something and you go, wait, I don't understand anything. Here's an example. The old man's glasses were filled with sherry, right? So up until I said the word sherry, or filled rather, up until the point I said filled, you were assuming I was talking about these kinds of glasses. You were going down the garden path of interpretation. And then once I said filled, you go, wait a second, you can't fill these glasses with anything. And then I said sherry, and then it all makes sense again. That's a conversational repair called the garden path sentence. And we do that all the time. So what kinds of errors can you detect? We said errors of fact, things that don't align, right? And we talked about garden path sentences. Anything else? Anybody else? All right, I was going to say, one thing I was hoping you might observe is, as you just said, prosodic information carries a lot of the burden of meaning, much more than you think, much more than you think. We gave the example of really or really. Same word, two very different senses. All of a sudden, the intonation, the prosodic, is very, very important. So I'm going to skip through a couple slides. You can look at these later. But here's an interesting example of a couple examples of chatbots where this is your Bitcoin advisor. So they're going back and forth. This is spoken, actually. This is a transcription. The person says, hey there, Bitcoin buddy says something, current price, tells you that. It gives you a little bit of additional information, which is important. And then it says, thanks, and I didn't get that. He's trying to hang up on you, and you didn't understand that. Confidence goes up or down when that happens? Probably down. There are also errors like this. When the system is unable to recognize the terms of the conversation. Are you able to take refillable water bottles into the venue? And the event advisor says, this is Albert Hall in Britain. We don't have any events at the moment. And so the person keeps insisting, can I take water bottles in? And so this is a conversation that's going nowhere fast because it doesn't understand what a water bottle is. Or just as a design issue, if you're very hip and with it, you can speak with a lot of emojis, a lot of emoticons like this. Recommendation, you don't do that. Looks terrible. People tend to not like that. Or you could do this. This is a weather bot that uses these very colloquial terms like when, warm, and yuck. And that's not what the person comes to the conversation bot with. Important point, you have to align what the person is expecting to get from the conversation with what the conversation AI can do. So there are lots of ways to handle errors. The most common one is to set up what's called a common ground, a shared understanding. So we then go through this initial engagement, and then you commit to engage, and you go back and forth, and you construct mutual meaning. So this is in linguistics called creation of a common ground. And so as the conversation moves on, that common ground will evolve and change. And so when things go wrong, you have to agree on how to repair the conversation. So all of a sudden you've popped up a meta level, and you're talking about the terms of the conversation. So you eventually get through, in a successful transaction, you get through this whole conversation back and forth. So we have to remember in conversations, error events are not the same as users misbehaving. It may be that your parser didn't get it or didn't understand the term of discussion. So different kinds of errors require different kinds of strategies in response. Users, by and large, want to be cooperative. I mean, you will always get kids that are being deeply annoying. And often when things go wrong, the users will initiate repair on their own. So users will have an intent, whether it's spoken aloud or not, or if it's uses language that is not obvious and explicit. For example, Adrian and I are having dinner at the pizza place, and I say, Adrian, can you pass the salt? An appropriate answer from Adrian would be, yeah, sure. That's not what I wanted. I wanted you to hand me the salt. So that's called implicit intent. So the surface structure, what I said, has to be parsed and understood in terms of a deeper common ground, trying to achieve a common action. So it's our job not just to figure out what the shared intent is, but to act on it and point out when things go wrong. So basically, you have a repair strategy built into your AI. So an LLM does a lot of the language handling, but then there's all this stuff going from the initial prompt, figuring out what a time it is, all this mechanism that has to be wrapped around the LLM in order to create a conversation. So conversational UIs, the answer is not an LLM. It's part of the answer. It's not the whole thing. One of the things that your conversational UI has to do is pivot. So when your AI doesn't have a great answer, you have a couple options here. You can say you don't know, you can give an alternative answer, you can give a long answer with a better explanation. The deeper point here is your system has to have an understanding of how accurately it knows what it knows and does the right thing. So you can do a short pivot like saying, I'm sorry, I just don't know how to help. So there are different strategies for repairing things when things go wrong. And of course, spoken language is full of this property of ambiguity. This is a little conversation between Mr. Scott and the Star Trek computer. Notice two things. A, he has to clarify the ambiguous phrase. B, this is the way people thought conversational UIs would work. In particular, he presses and say, hey, Star Trek.
Please enter program.
The android at the bar said you could show me my old ship. Let me see it.
Insufficient data. Please specify parameters.
He doesn't know who he is. It's not personalized.
The Enterprise. Show me the bridge of the Enterprise, you chattering piece of...
There have been 5 Federation ships with that name. Please specify by registry number.
NCC 1701. No bloody A, B, C,
that's negative
or
information.
D.
Program complete. Enter when ready.
I love that example because it's a deep ambiguity and the system doesn't know who he is. Should have, but. So we've got these strategies for rapid reprompting, kind of obvious, or asking people to reframe the question so they can get to a place where it can answer. And so you get this idea. I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about timing because when you're building a conversational UI, you can run it as fast as you want, but it's possible to be too fast and it's very possible to be too slow. So here's a video clip from a field of study I did. And listen to the timing problems here. Oh, wait.
Seconds.
I'm going to skip forward. Okay, let's go here. Ignore the Marx Brothers for a second.
Okay, Google.
So one of the issues in conversational UIs is discovering what's called the endpoint. It's when you stop speaking. So again, if Adrian and I are talking back and forth, and he stops for 100 milliseconds, I know he's done. Right? That's a very subtle thing. It's hard for AI systems to know when the endpoint is reached.
Call Liz.
Listening. Okay. Listening.
Okay, Google, call Liz.
See, the timing is all wrong here. So she's waiting for, this is an unreasonable amount of time to wait. And that means it failed.
Okay, try it
Get the
again.
point. So these kinds of things are really important. This is a very modern system. I'm going to just show you 30 seconds of this. So this is this guy talking to Meta's chatbot.
What's been on your mind lately? Anything you want to talk about? I'll take my time.
What's been on my mind lately?
Take your time with that one. Seriously though, what's been occupying your thoughts?
That didn't work well, right? So it comes back way too quickly. He's sitting there going, clearly thinking the system doesn't know that. So it's trying to advance the conversation too fast. So the timing too fast or too slow is critical.
Okay, Google.
So I'm going
What's
to
the
skip over this.
closest
This is an
restaurant to
example, though, of barge in where the Google Assistant did not allow me to barge in. I could not say something to interrupt it. So if I'm talking to you and I start talking on top of you, I'm trying to barge in, I'm trying to break in. Critical characteristic for all these systems. Also, you have to figure out as a user what this stuff knows and doesn't know. So I could ask a question like, how old is Obama? And it says, does this Google voice search gives me that pretty good answer. How old is his wife? It knows who his wife is by dereferencing the pronoun his wife, meaning with respect to the previous query. So this is cool. We're actually able to do this. This is an advanced. When I was a graduate student, this was advanced computer science. If you ask how old are her kids, it now knows you're talking about Michelle, not Barack, so it gives an appropriate answer. Great. Now, interestingly, if you ask about Donald Trump's, how old is his wife, it gives 3 answers. Why does it give 3 answers? Because he's had 3 wives. Now, the convention in normal speech is that we only talk about the current wife or the latest one, but it doesn't know this convention. How many conventions do we need to build in to make our UIs work? So this is a more recent example. Same questions. How old is President Obama? Gives the right answers. But notice that it gives a prompt at the end trying to continue the conversation, trying to keep it going. It's different than the old design. So here I ask about how old is his wife? Same question. It gives me the right answer. Here's the question about her kids. Get the same answer. That's all good. And of course, now Gemini says it knows about the convention. It just has his most recent wife. And then gives an additional continuation prompt. One way that we design conversational UIs is by creating this design artifact of persona. Have people used personas before? Yes? No? So a persona is basically a backstory for your typical user or a category of user. And you use that and run your testing against what your typical OLA user would do. So when you're designing these chatbots, conversational UIs, you need to be transparent about what it knows and doesn't know, and design for what works now, not what your engineering people tell you is going to work in 6 months. Don't believe them. Sorry, engineers, but they kind of overpromise sometimes. Be sure that you can make this whole thing usable from a human perspective. So your design priorities are to be utilitarian first, be friendly second, use humor very sparingly, and just to keep users engaged. Be careful, be careful. You want to design your chatbot not to replace human interaction, but to augment it. So always have it out. Always have an escape hatch. So people, and that's the technical term, the escape hatch. So I can get to the human, or I can change topics or something. So you want to be able to set the mental model boundaries very, very clearly. So the best practices, right? I will sum this all up by saying, the very last line there is test everything multiple times. You cannot test too much. When you're designing these chatbots, design for the way people actually talk, not the way you think they talk. So do field testing. You cannot replicate actual users with a test rig. So I've got a bunch of examples here. I'm running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to just point out when chatbot work really well, they work really well, and they can save a company a lot of money. In this case, the AirAsia's chatbot saves 80% of queries are handled automatically. And they have an escape hatch so people can go straight to a human. Bank of America has a similar experience with their Erica. Domino's chatbot works well. But there are lots of negative examples out there as well. Telephone companies are notorious for this. And chatbots that give really too good deals to believe, that's a problem. I have to tell you, Facebook's messenger bots are currently at a 70% failure rate. And so they fail over to humans. And so that's ending up costing them money. So on. There are tons of chatbot providers out there. That's a list for you to look at some point. I'm just going to skip through those. If you want to build a chatbot, we're not going to do it in this class. There's another class for that. There are a couple of things to look at. In particular, those are two conferences that focus exclusively on conversational UIs. Where's all this going? First thing is we're going to mix modalities, voice plus visual. So camera input, video output. So you can start to ask questions. You can say something and say, show me how to make avocado toast, and we'll put up a video on your local display. The big question will be, how do we build these LLM-based conversational agents? We've got them all out there. How do we control them? So I could tell you how we do it now. Prediction, that's going to change in a year. So anything I tell you now is not going to be true in a year. So look at this as sort of advice. So we have these pre-training steps, these fine-tuning steps, all this sort of stuff. If you want to build it for a specific task, come back and look at these slides. We also will be seeing a future integration of more specialized knowledge sources. So imagine, a world with with Wolfram Alpha built into ChatGPT. Wolfram Alpha, if you don't know, is a spectacularly good mathematics and science query system. Really very good. And you will be having more and more of these things that work as adjunct systems. So you don't have to pop out to a specialized chatbot, but it'll be built into your system, in this case, in Maps. And as we have more and more wearable devices, that's going to imagine you're going to have these more and more chatbots built into the devices as you wear them. We're going to go more and more towards agents, so you can then use these. This, if you haven't seen it, your homework assignment for the next week, how many people have seen her? Just out of curiosity. The rest of you, go watch it this weekend. I think it's on Netflix. It will give you a really interesting perspective on the whole chatbot story. Trust me on this one. Language ID, we talked about mixed initiative language switching earlier. And we need to do these multimodal things so we can actually have even better multimodal conversations. Want to learn more? There's a couple of recommendations. In particular, not CSS, but CS224V is Monica Lamb's class, and she spends the entire quarter doing what I just did in 90 minutes, except you end up building a thing. So we've talked about that. I'm going to give you that very quickly and conclude today's class with that question. The remarkable thing about a lot of these systems is that, I don't know how many of you have done this, but when I put up the video, YouTube bot actually creates a transcript of each video, and you can click through and get to it. And so everything I've said will be transcribed so that you can look at it later. Better, you can then take that transcription, paste it in the Gemini, and say, summarize the lecture from today. And it'll then give you the highlights. And if you want, you can ask for the timestamp so you can find the appropriate slide. So that's not a conversation, but it uses part of the technology, which is truly, in many ways, superhuman. All right. Thanks for coming, everyone, today. I will see you not next week, but a week from Tuesday.